It's official, y'all. We have our unified Impact World Heavyweight Champion, Rich Swann, who is officially going to be taking the AEW World Champion Kenny Omega title versus title at Rebellion.
Yes.
And while this may be historic, well, if you heard our episode last week, you know we have our reserves, and that's why we're going to get into all of that right now. What's up, folks? It is Nigeria Miranda and our special guest, Pups, here today.
Yep. She just jumped on me literally as we just started. Okay.
Good wholesome content there.
Yes. All right.
Yeah, we got a lot to talk about. Again, I just want to give a disclaimer based on our first week of doing our new style and doing our weekly Impact reviews, that it is very vital that all you all who are very interested in knowing when these episodes are going to drop, that you subscribe and hit the notification bell. I know that is an oversaturated term and more of a directional thing, or an instructional thing, should I say, that happens on YouTube all the time. But like, because we're still trying to fill out our when we're going to go live and really our niche and whatnot, in order to kind of support, it's definitely vital for you to know when we might impromptu just pop up and start talking some Impact. So that is our little pep talk there. And so we're going to get into everything. But Miranda, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to talk about. What happened at Sacrifice this past Saturday? There was a lot of changes, a lot of big news coming out of it. But yeah, the biggest one is now we finally know who's going to be facing Kenny Omega at Rebellion, and who's going to be representing Impact Wrestling in this title versus title match.
Yeah. And, again, another disclaimer, our new format now is we're going to take the hottest topic coming out of Impact Wrestling this week, maybe throwing an extra little subtopic in there, but we're definitely going to talk about the biggest thing that came out of Impact on Access TV, and if there's a pay-per-view, whatever the news may be of that week. And like, without a doubt, this is the one. Now that we know that it is going to be Rich Swann versus Kenny Omega at Rebellion. Now, is this the way you would have booked it? Would you would have had Rich, or would you would have had Moose here?
That's a good question, because I weighed them both. Knowing what I feel is going to happen, and we've talked about this, which I feel like Kenny Omega is coming in and taking the Impact World Championship. It kind of makes sense to have Rich Swann be the unified champion, because that seems like it's a more realistic way for Kenny Omega to win. I would have loved to see him in a match against Moose, because I feel like if Kenny Omega is the hype that he says he is, that Don Callis says he is, that the internet wrestling community says he is, he could face any challenger of any strength level, any size. And so being able to see Kenny Omega do what he does best against someone at the size of Moose would have been great. But also it seems like they're putting something bigger for Moose, in the back end, that Moose is going to come back and he's going to continue to be in this big picture at Impact. And maybe it's better for him to not face Kenny Omega and have a big loss like that in his record. So I go back and forth on it. Ultimately, it does make sense that they went with Rich Swann, not only because that's, who the company believes in, but ultimately in the way that I see this happening with Kenny Omega beating Rich Swann, that is going to, make it better for both Kenny and for Rich in this victory.
You know, I am going to play one of the internet folks who are always pissed off about everything. And quite frankly here, Moose losing kind of hurt me because I just feel like everything he's been doing has been really good. And, you know, I've had my reserves. Again, nothing about Rich Swann personally because I think he's hella cool person.
Yes.
You know, met him and talked a bunch of times. But I just felt like the booking of, you know, the booking over the last year or so, I just wasn't a huge fan of. We talked extensively about all of that, but I felt like what Moose has been doing has really been some of the must-watch stuff on Impact. He's been essentially carrying the company, and even when people didn't believe he was a champion, then he essentially, if you think about this, you know, people didn't think he was a champion, but now that they made it an official championship run, then you say, all right, well, let's look at his championship run. Well, that's been spectacular. Everything he's been doing with the belt has been good, and for it to be this, it's kind of like, okay, somebody had to win for sure. But now it just feels so devastating to everything Moose has been kind of doing, which has already been overshadowed by, you know, just the legitimacy of the title run now being legitimate, and people aren't going to go back and think back to it because wrestling fans have short-term memory. It just hurts. And that was like, so now what? And then, you know, you kind of go, you know, taking a peep at his social media, and you're thinking like, all right, now he's going to take some time off. I don't think Impact can use him not being on TV, not having something to do, you know, not being a monster heel that he is. And I hate to say it, but I think this may potentially be some of his last days in Impact. I can see, you know, a lot of interest coming out of the last few things that he's been doing. And, you know, if bigger dollars are to call, then, and maybe this was part of the booking, maybe because they had to put, maybe he had to lose because maybe this is his way out. But as a fan of Moose, it just hurts.
Yes, no, I agree. I feel like in some ways having him win would have validated his run, but I just don't, you know, if I'm looking at between the two, who you're going to sacrifice to Kenny Omega, because literally this is what I feel like you're just sacrificing one of your biggest stars to Kenny Omega, period. I could see it where if you're sacrificing Moose, that's at a much bigger level, and I think that could be more detrimental to him than to Rich Swann.
That's a cow over a lamb here.
Yes, you know, and so would have been great to see them in a match, absolutely, because I feel like Moose would have brought something very different to the table. And I also think if Kenny Omega is as good as he says he is, he could face any competitor. When you think about more of just where the type of size and style Kenny Omega has faced really too over the past year, it's more people the same size, you know, and somewhat same style. You know, you've had some differences, say in Jon Moxley. He defended the Mega Campeon in AAA against Laredo Kid, who's a cruiserweight. Same thing with Rich Swann. So I would have loved to see someone of a bigger size, as in Moose, you know, face him. But, you know, ultimately at the end of the day, I would rather hopefully see more of a long-term career in Moose and him not being sacrificed to Kenny than, you know, ultimately we know what Rich Swann's role is in this story. And that's to get beat by Kenny. That's just the way it is.
And now Don Callis, you know, calls Kenny the wrestling god. I mean, it calling him a god, and you know, Moose goes by the moniker of the wrestling god. I mean, I'm pretty sure there might have been some feathers ruff with that as well too, because like any little thing could fickle anybody. But like at this point now, it's Impact definitely being held as a sacrificial lamb to AEW, and it's sad to say, but you know, that's where this is going. And I unless there's some form of a DQ or something, or
unless there's something one of the biggest swerves in modern wrestling that we get, that, you know, this is where the story looks like it's going.
Yeah. I don't know. It's really hard to be excited about this because it's historic and it should be an amazing match at a big night, but like ultimately we could be losing something we're very passionate about, and that's Impact Wrestling, because I do not know where they go from this if it goes the way and the path that it all seems to be the prediction that everyone's giving. And you know, the only thing I can say is, you know, after Don Callis promo on Impact on Access that went about 5 minutes, you know, he said you're going to be part of history, and he said it's already been written. I don't know what that means, and I think he's very particular in his words because the whole promo was sharp. Unless that was something that was misspoken, which I thought because it felt a little out of place. I'm thinking to myself, like, well, what is he talking about? And like, I think that a swerve could be the way to go here, but I still don't have a lot of confidence. I wouldn't bet. I wouldn't be a bet man on it. I'm going with my money on the definite Impact Wrestling here.
Yeah, I mean, it could mean something as big as, say, Jon Moxley interfering, and maybe that's where a big swerve comes in. But if you're booking a title versus title match, you're not doing it so a DQ happens. You know, it's for something to happen where one of these titles moves companies. You know, I feel like will there probably be shenanigans, something I could absolutely see it, you know, and you talked about it last week, you know, what if somebody, say like a Rich Swann or Moose, ends up winning the AEW World Championship? I mean, you threw that teaser out there, and that could be very much a thing. If, say, someone like Jon Moxley interferes and, you know, then goes after Rich Swann himself, you know, that would be a pretty interesting story. But the likelihood of that happening, and knowing where all this came from and the relationship building, it all begins really the Alpha and Omega, like the beginning and the end of this starts with Kenny. So it's, to me, I understand what Don's saying by the story's already been written, because I think it has been. It's been written in for quite some time. And this is just, you know, how it's going to play out.
Yeah. And again, despite all the good promo work, excitement, build, whatever you want to call it for this, I can't. And it's crazy too, because we've been very critical about Rich Swann booking and like the whole idea of him being like the super baby face and the whole comeback story and essentially the American dream, whatever how you want to put it. But like, this is definitely the obstacle where it's just like, oh, there's no way.
Yeah, literally, like, there's no way. It feels impossible, you know. From especially Rich Swann, his career has always had some type of limit, you know, coming from the E and, you know, his run as a cruiserweight to coming to Impact, still also, you know, a run in the X division and having a what I think many consider a pretty big leap into the World Championship picture, beating someone of the caliber of Eric Young, who a lot of people favored, including us, you know, to have more of a longer reign, beating someone like Moose, you know, I mean, he is a great underdog, but when you go up against, you know, what professional wrestling is right now in Kenny Omega, I mean, that's just insurmountable odds that even someone of Rich Swann's caliber, it's very, very hard to bet for him.
Yeah. Look, there's a lot of things too. The more you talk, I'm starting to think about here. Like, one thing, and this is not even like really on par, but from what you're saying, the one thing I realize is that right now in Impact Wrestling, they aren't making multiple people interesting. And I think that's the issue. And I think now that Moose doesn't have anything to kind of carry around, I said having a title makes you an automatic storyline. At this point now, besides this Rich Swann thing, I'm really not sure who to direct my attention to as far as pure interest. I mean, the Knockouts division is all a big swirl, and I think that you know, maybe we could talk about the tag division, but I got like to be honest, I have a hunch that like the Good Brothers and them are on like a soccer type of loan right now, where AEW's like, hey, we want that talent, we'll pay for it, we'll pay for their a borrow on their contract. We'll shoot you the money for that as a loan. You can still use them, but we'll feature them often. Also, can you throw out commercial on, because like they legitimately came and special handedly picked them, and they're being featured on both shows each week. And so with that,
they're the only Impact talent that's featured on both shows.
Exactly. So nothing against them, but that really takes the uniqueness of watching Impact, because that was a team that you wanted to check out. When they signed, that was a huge deal. So when you go down the list, you're like, well, who else is really sparking my interest? Like, you brought up Eric Young, who was definitely the best heel and All Pro Wrestling at the time. And there's really not much going on there. And again, I'm not going to take away from nothing about the wrestling because the wrestling is there. But now I'm just saying, how do you grow your fan base and how you keep an interest when things have just mellowed out the way it is? And then, looking at the X Division championship picture, like that's still a big whirlwind of things. There's a lot of potential there. Not only just potential, but there's a lot of things that we want that should happen and could happen, but just hasn't really hit the peak. And I think that Ace Austin being a champion is interesting. Chris Bay still always in the picture, but still needs to be more added to really draw in more interest from people. Because right now, I feel like I feel like Impact is synonymous with Kenny Omega name, and while that storyline should be cool, it should not supersede the entire brand.
Exactly. And it seems like that's what it's felt like, whether it's these AEW promos that come every week, whether it's this big story of Kenny and now Rich Swann in this title versus title match. One thing it'll be interesting to see is if we do see Kenny Omega back on Impact prior to this. Because right now we still have at least a month away. Don Callis is now being the representative, so maybe we see more of Don Callis. But we may not even see Kenny Omega between now and Rebellion, and so maybe that's what they tease to help get more viewers and to help draw that interest out and see what happens. But come on, when are we going to see Rich Swann on AEW?
Never.
Like when?
Never.
I mean, that's insane. This is insane. Like, this is not a talent exchange. It's just like, you're right. Impact deciding we're going to pick, the Good Brothers. We'll pay you to let us borrow them on a weekly basis. They did their thing with bringing on, Top Flight over for a little bit. And that's it. No other exchange. And really, if you want to say, the Good Brothers are the only, quote unquote Impact talent, but you hardly even remember that now just because they're featured on AEW every week. So I don't know. Going back to what we've talked about for quite some time, this was a really missed opportunity to have a true exchange of talent in areas that they both needed. The tag division in AEW is outstanding. The knockouts division in Impact is outstanding. The X division and just the talent that both companies have, melded in is excellent. They could have really done some really awesome things, and they haven't. And I don't know if they ever will, or again, if this is just solely based off of, Kenny Omega and just giving him the Impact World Championship.
Yeah, I mean, if the motivation's for ratings, then I mean that's not going to, sustain when you're not really. I don't know what the word I want to use here.
No, you're not doing anything unique. You're not doing anything that is capturing an audience's attention. That was why there was such a big hoopla about this in the first place. A huge crossover in a world now where, now there's more North American promotions than we've had in a long time, and they're now all actively running again. Crossover of talent and opportunities is something that people crave, and that's a message that AEW has preached for quite some time. So it was them, quote unquote, practicing what they preached, but it really ended up not being that way, and also impacting benefiting because for a lot of TNA's and Impact's career, they've had that crossover with New Japan and with AAA. So they've been one of the promotions who have actively partnered with other promotions worldwide, and it's been successful. But this would be the first time that two large North American promotions of this caliber would do it on national television on a consistent basis. And, again, it just feels like it's a little bit of a miss.
Yeah. I don't know, man. I this is one of the ones where I knew that, after the win, I was like, cool, but like, now what?
What?
It literally, to be honest, like, I don't know if I said this last week, but I know this has crossed my mind a few times. But this legitimately feels like when Katniss Everdeen won the first Hunger Games and had to go back to it the next one. It's just like,
that's a good ass analogy. You had not said it last week, but because I would have remembered. I'm a huge Hunger Game fan. So yes, I totally agree.
You won something that was already the impossible storyline reason to really be fed back to the wolves one more time.
Mm-hmm.
And it's literally not looking likely that is going to happen. And this time, all the stakes are up. And I there's rumors and stuff going out there saying that Tony refuses for his folks to lose and whatever. But like, I don't understand how anybody can run any wrestling promotion when you realize like, oh, well, then again, I'll just eat all my words right now. But like, it does make sense if it was a partnership. But hey, this is not what that is, because this is
it just doesn't feel that way. It really doesn't feel that way. Now that we are at this point, 3 months out of this initial announcement and initial big crossover?
I tell you what, I will get pissed off if I see anybody from Impact end up on AEW Dark or Elevation, because that's a slap in the face. And when you have a really prominent storyline between the two of them available, put Rich on Dynamite, make it make sense. Any of these knockouts are Dynamite ready. I mean,
absolutely, 100%. And even, I mean, now AEW is teasing a program between Kenny Omega and Christian Cage, so why don't you have Rich Swann interfere in a match between Kenny and Christian, and again, they've acknowledged Christian Cage as a TNA champion. You mentioned that last week. And so, I mean, there's so much history tied in, just so much history, that it's a kind of a shame it's not being acknowledged a little bit more.
Yes, it's sad that, on a weekly Impact highlight, or what it is, the weekly Impact moment of the week, God, that they always show up things that are completely irrelevant. I mean, if you watch the Twitch stream, at random parts of the day, they bring up things that are relevant. So you see things about Christian Cage, you see things about Bobby Lashley, because their social media team is working their ass off. That's not even.
Yes. And you know what? That's a beautiful thing. And that's something like Impact can do that. I feel like sometimes AEW, will do that more on the sly and then deny it. But be honest about when you are trying to, intentionally do something with your promos or how you're building things to take a jab at, say, another company. Yeah. Impact does it so well because they have the history, and really a lot of people who have made their careers and reestablished themselves in WWE and even AEW had a turn in Impact. And, there's no shame in that. If anything, it proves how valuable Impact is as a way to help elevate people who, eventually other companies found value or revalue again.
Yeah, I just want to bring up this comment really quick. Thanks, Trent, for stopping in today. I mean, look, Eddie Edwards and Rich Swann, they had the best friend angle thing. And I mean, they're legitimate friends, so I get it. But at the point, if the stakes were to get higher, if they were to really go out and go, through and through with this, and Kenny starts talking, if I win, then I'm closing Impact doors or something, then, maybe the angle of the Impact heroes come to save it through another potential shutdown that they've had numerous times where, talent leaves and whatnot. I mean, again, Impact is one of the most resilient brands out there, period.
Yes.
But, Eddie Edwards being involved with this, I mean, at this point now, wow me with something, because I don't know what's happening. All I know is that Rich Swann has just been tagged and it's not looking good. And eventually somebody's going to have steak on their kitchen table. Like, that's where I see this going. And that's not, nothing about this is how I want it to be. I don't want it to be, I want it to be a partnership where people are working on both brands and you're seeing people feature. And like, if it's really about the talent and it's really about the fans, then we want to see our favorites on both sides. And we want to see opportunities that people wouldn't get, and getting the spotlight on television and our dream matches come true. And some people who's been working really hard, who's never had an opportunity to get opportunities like these unprecedented opportunities. And everybody's talking about history, this, and that. And none of this wouldn't even matter. The fans didn't care. And what we care about is seeing these crossovers that they're not doing. And again, this feels like ultimately the big brother taking advantage of the little brother, which should not even be a thing. So we'll just say the older stepbrother all of a sudden coming in the house and taking advantage of the biological brother and throwing them to the side. And then ultimately with the good brothers, it feels like a soccer loan. It really feels like,
it does.
really good. We're going to pay to have him on our team, and that's that. And that's
And you know what? That also leads. I mean, I don't know exactly how long the Good Brothers contracts are for. I mean, they've only been with Impact now. Yeah, they just got there, so it makes it too pretty obvious that once their contract is up, they're gonna jump over to AEW. So literally, you're just getting them on loan, so you can lose them whenever their contract is up.
Or buyout is soon to come.
Yeah.
Or I mean, I don't know if the business tanks, then what do you do? I mean, essentially that's what happened with NWA, where they didn't have money to pay certain people, so people had outs on their contract, and however it was settled. What if a contract is up for question? And this is how contract works. You can say, all right, you can buy it out. I mean, if you don't know anything, it happens in all sports. You give somebody in football a 5-year contract. They play one good year, then you're stuck for 4 years of nonsense. You're like, all right, well, look, we're going to give you a buyout. We're going to just give you a lump sum, and we're going to rip this up. And at this point now, if Impact is really desperate for money, like the way it seems like, and you got AEW coming in doing these commercials as paid advertisement, and they're busting your balls each week, then maybe they are, and maybe the Good Brothers is up for a contract is up for discussion. I mean, Finn Juice winning the titles did.
Yeah.
I guess it was cool, but like, huh? I'm not sure where they go at. I'm not sure where they go next with this, and it was one of those unpredictable things that kind of happened out of no place, and we'll kind of see how that all plays out. But
I mean, there's speculation that they're going to go back to Japan with them, so that maybe they'll be defended on a New Japan show, because they do have New Japan Strong here in the U.S. So maybe they'll be defended there. I mean, in some ways, it is kind of a relief, because they, it wasn't like they were going to be defended on AEW television. And with the Good Brothers kind of playing dual roles, you know that they weren't going to be able to have a sturdy program on Impact. So it's a good surprise. It's another, I mean, that's a whole other discussion too about what that partnership between New Japan and Impact looks like, because this is not the first go round, and that partnership has not always gone smooth. So maybe it's a mea culpa, maybe this is a way of kind of wiping the slate clean. But you're right. Long term, what does this mean, having Finn Juice have those Impact tag team titles? How are they going to be defended? What are they going to build up to? What does it all mean? That's a lot of questions, but I'm not necessarily mad at that. I think too, it is very interesting for Impact to have two active, quote unquote, partnerships happening at the same time. That is very newsworthy, but that does leave a lot of questions of what does that look like on the New Japan side.
Yeah, also, fool me once, but you're not fooling me twice. When they had the opportunity to put a title in New Japan by, crowning Chris Bay, the match, the pay-per-view before he went off to the Super J Cup, I mean, that was your golden ticket to display your championships.
Well, and TJP, I believe, was technically X Division champion when he was on New Japan television as well.
No, it was Rohit.
Rohit was. Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
No, you're probably right. I wanted to say there was at one point that maybe, but maybe not. But even then, I don't think you're right. It would have really been.
No, you're right. He was champion when he was on television, but initially, because we didn't know anybody was going to work back again.
Correct. Yes.
The Super J Cup, where they said featuring Impact title, it was like, well, damn, he has a championship match before this.
Correct. Yeah, because that literally was like concurrently happening. So you're right. Like they could have had that opportunity then, and they didn't. Now we're seeing it with Finn Juice, but I mean, is it going to mean anything?
Yeah, that's the big one. Will it mean anything? Well, I think that will do it for our weekly lunch recap of Impact Wrestling. I mean, again, folks, I just to give you a little bit of instructions from the beginning of the show. We're still trying to fill out and massage when we want to do these. We're working on scheduling and everything, so they're kind of impromptu. Looks like you will be expecting them on Wednesdays, so the day after Impact on Access TV. in order for you to know when we're going to go live, I know you done heard this a billion times, but if you subscribe and hit the notification bell, then you will see Big Gold Belt Media is live, and that's us talking Impact Wrestling, the biggest and latest news of Impact this week, including things that come out of the pay-per-view, things that are hitting just the news sheets, and then things obviously after respective pay-per-views and whatnot. So we're looking for the biggest topic, maybe a little subtopic as well. Giving you out this 30 minutes is just straight hashing out what it is. And we want to hear from you all too. So definitely get in the chats and let us know your thoughts on these discussions. And that way you can be a part of the show as well. But as far as for us, Nigeria and Miranda, and Miranda, I just added a whole new person in. I want to feel cool. You had your dog kids. I want to feel cool. Feel like it was two of us here. That's all that was. We'll be back next Wednesday, so definitely stay tuned for that. Thank you for tuning in today, folks. And as always, stay safe, and we'll see you then.